Hello, everybody. I hope you are doing well. It's Victor again with my dear friend Sarah. How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm good, thank you. For some reason, although I've done this a few times now, I still expect when you press the button to just suddenly see everybody somehow.
Yeah, I guess people will just join. They receive one email and then they get on board. Hi, Michael. Michael, nice to see you from Richmond. Nice to nice to see you over here. So we have people joining us, which is amazing. If you could let us know where you are based, that would be fantastic. Um, let's see what we have here today. We have Saren from Minnesota. Hello, Saren. Okay, Joanne Charleston. Another Joanne from Toronto, Canada. Nice to meet you, Joanne. So we have Julie, George. Okay, many people from the United States and Canada. There is George Nielsen in Portugal. Hello, George. Yes, so people are joining, and I welcome you all. Hope you like the topic. This is a very important one for sure for people who are willing to move to Portugal. This is one key steps um, related to the process. Yeah, so I was just talking to Sarah. We are both based in Portugal, but I'm in the north region, and Sarah, she's in Lisbon. Was talking about the weather, right, Sarah?
Always.
it, it, because it's cold. I mean, and I agree with you, Sarah. It's a beautiful day, but it's still, as you mentioned, we only know when we leave the apartment, but it seems to be a little bit cold here today.
No, it was nice, but it's still not quite warm enough. You know, the sun's out and it's lovely, but then when it goes behind a cloud, you do feel it's cooler. And the evening, it obviously drops. So we're not quite there yet with the warmer weather. But still,
True.
the sun shines and there's blue sky. So personally, that it is just uplifting.
It
That's
is.
what I love
It
about
is.
Portugal.
I agree with you. We have people from, so we have Jerry from Cleveland, Cynthia from California. Oh my. Setúbal. Oh yeah, many people from Portugal as well. Of course, this applies for you if you are already in Portugal or if you were not yet here. So it will be, hopefully it will be useful for all of you, this information we will provide. Just before we start, if you have any question, you can just let us know by posting a comment. We will go over the question in the end. We'll have some time for the Q&A. Um, let's see. I guess just one more minute
Hmm.
uh, so we start. It's good to see. I mean, there's some familiar names over here. It's always good to see um, people that I know from other uh, experiences. So if George is here, and we will talk about money exchange. Okay, so 5 minutes past six. I guess it's time for us to start, Sarah. So I'll let you go ahead, Sarah, and I'll be here. I'll be here so we can chat a little bit in some specific topics. Try to have a nice conversation. Um, if you, I mean, just before we start, just a very quick one. I've been working with Sarah for probably over 2 years now, I
I think
guess,
it's been
Sarah.
3 years now, actually.
Over
The
three
thing is,
years.
time does fly. You know,
Time
I've
flies,
been telling
really.
people I've been here for 6 months, but it's actually 9 months. So, you know, I think it's probably more like 3 years.
I'm all about compliments for Sarah for the business she manages. I mean, I guess all of our clients, they when they come to the stage where they need to transfer money to Portugal, uh, we do refer to Sarah, and they always come back to us because we would always ask them how was the experience. They always love the experience. We both like to have more of a personal way of doing business, and this can be really good, especially for those who are going through this very important process of moving to another country. So just want to say that, I mean, uh,
Thank you.
been so good working with you, Sarah. And I know you have some very important information to share with us.
Yes, no, thank you for having me on here. Do you want to share the slides and then?
Oh yeah, let me
Yeah,
just add to stage. Here we are.
excellent. Okay, so um, basically, I help clients move their money to, in this case, Portugal, but we do it around the world. So if you're based in America, if you're based in Canada, the UK, Australia, anywhere around the world, and you're moving money specifically to Portugal, that's where we help with that conversion. I've been doing this now for nearly 18 years. As I said, I work for SpartanFX as the company, and now I live in Portugal myself. I actually live between Cascais and Lisbon. So if at the end you have my details, if you want to ask me anything about living here or my journey, then I'm more than happy to share that. Or if you're in the area, I'm happy to meet for a coffee and show you around. So my different hat on that I live here and love it. But I had been coming for the last couple of years, meeting people like Victor, and that's where people were saying, "Oh, you're going to move." And through that, I realised that I could live here, and it's no regrets. I would definitely recommend it. So you know Victor, who does a brilliant job with helping people move here. As I said, use experts the whole way. It just makes things so much less hassle and makes the process easier.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I do my best. I'm just like Sarah. Just a quick one. I'm just like her. I moved to Portugal. In my case, it was some years ago, but I do know the challenge and the expectations that we have when moving to a new place. We try to make it as straightforward as possible, knowing that there's some steps that they are a little bit more challenging. So our main goal is to make this transition as straightforward as possible with some good partners, just like Sarah.
Excellent. Okay. So this presentation, we're going to talk really about the money aspect side of things, of transferring your money to Portugal. It's an element that often gets overlooked. It's thought of last minute when you're told that you need to make a payment, say to your lawyer, or you're renting a property or buying a property, but it is something to start really thinking about earlier. We'll talk about sort of what has been going on, what is going on, politically. And I know I saw some of you based in Canada as well. The rates that I have are all selling US dollars and buying euros, so the euro US dollar rate, but we do deal with Canadian dollars. And some of the things I'll talk about are really affecting globally. So whether you're based in the UK, Canada, whether you're already in Portugal as well. Then also we'll talk about different tips and things that you need to think about when it comes to actually moving money, in the process of moving money. And then also we'll talk about other things that you need to consider. So we'll touch on buying property, bank accounts in Portugal. We'll touch, I know you've had a couple of questions maybe about tax. So we'll touch on that as well. And then there'll be questions at the end. So hopefully it will be useful, some elements, if not all. So what I wanted to start with is this is the exchange rate. Really, we're going back to 2015, ultimately for a couple of reasons. One, just to show sort of the volatility we've seen really since COVID, essentially. We saw the pandemic, we've seen obviously the start of wars. The Fed, for example, and the ECB had been increasing interest rates very aggressively to curb inflation, which is where we saw the US dollar strengthen, which again is very good for you that you're selling US dollars and buying euros. And those are the sort of things that normally, some are unpredictable. Some things we're looking out for is what data, what sentiment's happening. So now if we come to present sort of day, we're talking about the election and Trump. Elections can move the market quite dramatically because, again, a lot of things are often priced in. The market is forecasting it, they're predicting it. Obviously, yes, there's certain things along the way of the election that they're looking at the polls to see, who's ahead. But ultimately, it really is often down to the wire as to whether who's going to win, and then often it can be unknown. So what we saw when Trump was announced as president, we saw that the exchange rate moved 2%. So what does that mean in monetary terms? So if you were buying 250,000 euros, the difference is about 6,000 US dollars. So that's why I want to start thinking about exchange rate movements, depending on what you're looking to do, whether it be, yes, obviously on small amounts, 2% isn't as much, but obviously it is more impactful on the larger sums. But equally, even if we look back at that exchange rate graph that I showed you, where we've seen more, in fact, I'll go back briefly here, where we've seen a bigger dip. I mean, in about 3 months, we saw the exchange rate move so much that difference wasn't 6,000, it was 32,000. So again, it doesn't often mean that these sort of dips to that extreme happen very often, but they do happen, and obviously they're not predictable. So it's just about thinking about how exchange rate movements can impact the price of your euros. And really, it's just to try and help you budget for your move to Portugal, because like myself, it does take time. You start the process, maybe even 12 months, 2 years, maybe a year. You're doing research, you're looking into it, and then, what's your time frames of actually getting here and then needing to move money. So they're the things you've got to sort of start really thinking about. So that's where we obviously saw a lot of US dollar strength on the back of obviously Trump coming in. There was a lot of things that he said, which policies that he wants to help strengthen the US economy, which is obviously very, very positive. So now, where are we at now? So the other thing as well is inflation and interest rates can't be ignored with all the things that you're seeing in the media about tariffs and things that obviously Trump and things want to do, or ceasefires, which we'll talk about, the war between Ukraine and Russia. But in the background, we've got the Fed, for example, looking at, and the ECB looking at inflation. And that's the kind of driver about the interest rates. Ultimately, governments like Trump want to cut interest rates because it will help the economy. Cutting interest rates will actually weaken the currency, so weaken the US dollar or weaken the euro. But at the moment, I think the Fed are a little bit hesitant to do that because they want to keep inflation under control. They want to see a few consecutive months of inflation being steady before they look to cut those rates. So that's something that we're sort of looking at, is inflation data that's coming out, what sentiment, for example, Christina, what will they come out and say, which will give an indication of interest rate cuts maybe for the rest of the year. But again, still bearing in mind that obviously the political agenda is that they want to cut interest rates because that will help the economy as well. Ceasefires, okay. The US dollar is what we call a safe haven currency. So whenever there's sort of turmoil, the markets are a little bit jittery, they'll go into safe havens like gold and the US dollar. They'll come out of the stocks and shares and they'll go into something that they deem a bit more stable and safe. So yes, there's a lot of conflicts going on around the world, but if we start to see ceasefires, then we will see money starting to come out of the US dollar, they'll be selling gold, and they'll be going back into the stocks and shares. So initially there could be weakness there in the US dollar if there are ceasefires, because as I said, it's seen as the safe haven currency. The other thing that people have been saying is that maybe if there was a ceasefire between the Ukraine and Russia, that would make energy prices cheaper for Europe, and that would help the euro. But as we see with a lot of things, if the wholesale price has gone up and they pass that on to their customers, when the wholesale price comes down, they don't often necessarily pass that on to their customers because they can make more profit. So it'd be interesting to see what the ceasefires do, but initially there could be a little bit of US dollar weakness, which is what we could see when they go back into those stocks and shares. So I talked about obviously political sentiment. The other thing as well is that sometimes the market moves with no, I suppose, physical information or data. It's just they will come out, as I said, Christine Lagarde will come out and perhaps give an indication that they may want to keep interest rates on hold, and the market will react to that and they'll forecast what they think that will impact the euro, for example. And it's similar with Trump. When he comes out and says something, the market reacts, and then they sort of adjust their prediction of what they think is going to happen to the US dollar, or they react quite dramatically to it. So, for example, the increase in tariffs is one of the things obviously we're talking about at the moment. Well, what does that actually really mean? Obviously, Trump wants to impose tariffs, but will he actually do it? And what impact will it have on other countries? So initially, we are seeing US dollar strengthen because he's talking about these tariffs, putting them in place. But what is the reality is that it depends on the bargaining power of other countries. You know, other countries are starting to maybe fight back. How much do they import or export? Really depends on how much they're impacted. So to give you a bit of an example, for example, Canada, they import a lot of beer and wine from America. It's like $1 billion industry. So if they turn around and say, okay, you put tariffs on, we'll stop importing from you, that will really impact a lot of American businesses. So it may be then that they have a little bit of a bargain chip to say, okay, we won't put the tariffs on. Again, it's that kind of backwards and forwards. You know, again, Canada are the biggest producer of oil, and they do supply a lot of oil to the US. So if they put tariffs on that oil coming in, again, they can leverage that and say, you know, obviously they've got power there over America from that perspective. Yes, obviously America, they are upping their production of gas and drill for oil, but again, these things will take time. Like me in the UK, for example, we do actually import a lot from the US. So again, will it give us the upper hand in negotiations? It's those sort of things that you've got to kind of look at, that his sweeping statement putting tariffs, but when they come to negotiations, it may be that countries can fight back and potentially stop those tariffs. He ultimately obviously wants to make sure that everything will be produced in America, so they're not relying on imports, and that they then start exporting more American goods. But it will take time for maybe factories to be built, for production to increase. This all sort of takes time. Also, in the meantime, by putting the tariffs, it does make products more expensive. And then again, that can obviously impact inflation and the economy in America as well. So it's a little bit of push and pull from that factor of, yes, it could strengthen the US dollars, which we've seen, but if the countries fight back, that could then weaken the US dollar. So these are the sort of things that we're looking at. But ultimately, it does make it a little bit difficult for the markets to forecast what's going to happen going forward. And these are the sort of things that we're looking at. And it's all about how can you help manage your budget, because you have US dollars, you have Canadian dollars, you have pounds, you need euros. It's then very difficult to budget because, you know, I had a client who was buying a property in Portugal, and they budgeted for a house and a car, but the exchange rate moved so much that they couldn't afford the car because the property became more expensive because of the exchange rate. So it can, as I said, it can be a little bit difficult to manage a budget, thinking about, okay, how much is going to cost me? How much do I need for the move? And it's an element to sort of really consider. And these are the things that we're seeing that obviously can affect. The other thing to bear in mind, and why I like to look at historic rates, because that's what we look at as well, is trends. So we can see a little bit of trends for the forecasting, but as I said, because of certain things that are going on at the moment that we've touched on, it does make it a little bit difficult to forecast. But what I say to customers is that what's the exchange rate in regards to where it's been? So if we look back even in the last year, or the first graph that I went back to 2015, that generally, yes, we have been lower. It has been better. We touched on nearly parity in 2022, but overall, we're still at very good levels. If you look, as I said, at this graph in the last year, yes, we have been a little bit lower in the last sort of few months, but overall, it's still very good levels to be buying euros if you're selling US dollars. So sometimes it's just putting that a little bit into perspective, because if you're only looking at it over a month or a couple of weeks, within like a time frame that you're looking at, all right, I need to make a payment next week, where's the rate? Oh, it was better last week. That's a little bit different, but actually you're still buying at a very good level, even if it may seem slightly more expensive than it was, say, a week ago or something like that. So that's the sort of thing sometimes to think about, is where's the rate been? Actually, am I still buying at a good level? And also thinking about what's the sort of your budget level is in. Actually, this is where it becomes a bit too expensive for me. That's the other thing to think about. How much more expensive can it get? What money have you got available? That's the other sort of thing to be looking at, because sometimes people wait and think, oh, is it going to get better if the US dollar is strengthening? Yes, but equally, if it goes against you, how much further can it go against you before it becomes too expensive? So they're the sort of things around sort of budgeting that we help people think about, and something just to get you thinking about, because as I said, most people do leave this to the last minute. So it's just getting you to think about it in advance, because you need to move money for all different reasons. As I said, you get, there's certain services that you're paying for, you get given invoice. You open a bank account, you need to put money in to show that you've got money in for the visa, or you might just be putting it to top up your account. You're renting a property, you might buy a property, paying for your NIF. There's loads of things that you might be looking to do along the process that you will need to. And ultimately, you're moving to Portugal, so you'll need euros to live day to day. So you will need to be moving money, if not all. Again, depending on what investments you've got, and obviously talk to a tax expert about what that looks like, about the best time to be moving it from that perspective. But ultimately, you're here living in Portugal, and we'll need euros. So the things to think about when you're moving money, I always break it down really into 4 things to think about. One is the price. So the price of, for example, what €1 will cost you, whether that be, your bank, the provider, ourselves. It's thinking about, okay, that's the cost. And that's what most people do think about. How much is it going to cost me? Can I get it cheaper somewhere else? The bank isn't always your cheapest option, so it's always worthwhile checking. I mean, we know places like, for example, Bank of America charge about 5%. So again, it's worthwhile checking the price and making sure that you're getting the best option there. Sometimes the bank will say they'll do it for free, but they might be referring to the transfer fee, but it will be in the exchange rate. They won't do it for free, and that's where you'll find the difference there. The other thing as well with the bank is that if they give you a quote, or you go into branch and you say, how much is it going to cost me to buy X amount of euros? They will give you a quote, but you haven't locked into that rate. The rate will only be when the money is actually transferred. So if it was that day, it may be similar to the one that they've quoted, It's the next day, it may be different. The rates are changing all the time. So again, it may change to what they've quoted. The only thing to bear in mind with that is that if you're paying somebody specifically, like a third party, and you need a specific amount of money, that can be slightly challenging, because then you might find that because the exchange rates move slightly with when they transfer the money, then it may be short when it hits that account. Or you might transfer them more money if the rate moves in your favor. So that's the other thing with the bank, is that it isn't when they quote you, it's actually when the money moves. And also, you can't really transfer and buy euros if you haven't got a beneficiary or you haven't got a bank account. That's with your bank, because they're not going to be able to hold euros for you unless you've got a euro account with your local bank in, say, America or Canada. And if you haven't, and you haven't got your Portuguese bank account set up, then through your bank, it's going to be difficult to buy euros in advance. So I'll get into that in a minute, but we can hold euros for you, so that's not an issue. But the biggest thing is really about the price. Always compare like for like, because as I said, the exchange rates move throughout the day. So if you get a price from your bank in the morning and then you price with us or somebody else in the afternoon, the rate could be completely different. So it needs to be at the same time that you're doing any sort of comparisons. The exchange rate. So I touched on that before, but that's where the timing of the exchange rate can actually be the one that either saves you or costs you more money, actually, not what's the rate against your bank or provider. Yes, obviously, if you're with Bank of America, then it is more expensive and you are seeing a much bigger saving. But as I said, the bank prices can vary. Ultimately, the exchange rate movement, that's where sometimes people can be caught out a little bit. And again, it's just thinking about it in advance just gives you more options. Because if, for example, someone says to you, right, you need to rent a property and you need to make the payment there by next week, your time frame is between now and next week. That's your time frame. And whatever the rate is in that week, that's what you're stuck with. You've got no other options. Yes, it may change a little bit through the week, but that's it. Whereas if you thought about it maybe a few months in advance, there may be scope to buy it sooner, and that's where you can save money. We had a client who they bought euros. I think this was it end of 2023. I remember the scenario, 2023, and in the September time, and then they actually transferred their money into euros at that point and held it with us. And then I think it was either February or March, they then bought the property and moved the money out. And I believe they saved 3,000 US dollars. So that was a way of saving some money, because they bought the euros in September, and I think it was February or March, they moved the money out to actually buy the property, but they'd already pre-bought their euros, and the difference in the rate, as I said, was 3,000. Sometimes it's a case of, can it help budget? Even if the rate, say, in that time moves in your favor and you think, oh, I missed out, it would have cost me a little bit cheaper. Sometimes it's peace of mind that it's not going to cost me any more money. That's the other side of it. Again, it's sort of, depending on your personality, whether sort of you feel like gambling or not as such. But again, it's sometimes it gives you peace of mind that I know that property or that amount of money I need to buy is going to cost me X, and it's not going to cost me any more. So again, it's just talking it through and seeing what the best option for you is. But you do have options, because at this point, if you're thinking about buying euros before you need them, or before you've got a Portuguese bank account, or before you've got a beneficiary to pay to, whether it be a lawyer or the seller of a property, we can hold euros on account. Some clients are buying a quarter of what they need, and then another quarter or a half, just to try and sort of spread the risk. So overall, the average that they're buying at is still a good rate. The other thing that we can do is, if you didn't want to commit all the money, specifically maybe if you're buying property, is you can fix the rate for a future payment. So 10% deposit, it's not a cost or a charge. It fixes the rate today, then you pay the remaining 90% when you actually need it. So for a property, if it completes in, say, 8-12 weeks' time, you complete then 90%, but you only need 10% upfront to fix that rate. So if you've got your money in higher interest earning accounts in, say, America, then you can hold the money there. We'd only need the 10% to fix the rate. So that's something to think about, and some clients do that. But again, it's all about looking at whether you think that you want to be buying euros in advance, and it's just giving you the options if you wish to do that. So compliance, sorry about the formatting. When we've exported it into this system, it's sort of changed slightly. The other thing to bear in mind is, again, timing is, again, not leaving it to the last minute. With us, we try our best to help with the compliance, and we liaise with banks and we push payments along. But ultimately, we've seen with some clients that have used their bank, it could take a week for the money to get here in Portugal. So again, if you're leaving it to the last minute, I've had clients that say, oh, I need my money there on Friday, and they've done it through their bank, that could be a bit of a push. So again, it's always worthwhile thinking about moving your money sooner, so then you're not stressed if you're leaving it to the last minute. Because what can happen as well is that the beneficiary bank can flag a payment, and then they want to find out more information about payment, maybe the source of funds. So if it's bank to bank, what they'll do is they'll contact the bank that sent the money and ask these questions. Now, really, if they're liaising, the bank in Portugal, if they're liaising with your bank in the US, that can often take time. So again, if you're using your bank, these are the things to maybe consider about that you could encounter. What we normally do is that the bank talks to us and says we need more information. We've already collected that up front and we can give it to them straight away, and it just helps speed up those payments, and really just no delays. But especially on larger sums of money, that's where you can see that payments can often get stopped more, then more documentation are needed. So it's just being prepared for that. With some companies, we've seen that they stop payments. You might think, oh, I only do small amounts. But I've seen other companies where they stop payments because they have to do checks for anti-money laundering. So if someone does maybe X amount of trades, exchanges, or they've reached over 10,000, then they'll start to investigate and ask for more information. So again, there is compliance around here, but often it is to protect you. But it's just to be aware that those sort of documentation, that's what we're trying to help make that process quicker for you. But bear that in mind, again, about what documentation you might need and banks taking longer and things like that, because they are a little bit more, I suppose, old school in their systems and processes, which Victor will probably explain a little bit more with the bank account opening here in Portugal.
Yeah, I would just like to jump in because sometimes we feel that Americans, especially, they are used to have such a straightforward and quick type of service there. Especially we talking about banks. They are digital. It's easy to use. There's an app, and although Portugal is, in my opinion, trying little by little to get to this standard, it has to comply with European rules, and they can be quite strict. Just one example, even us that we provide this relocation assistance, we have to do kind of an exam because we deal with banks. So, and I mean, there's such a importance in avoiding some kind of transactions related to money laundering, of course, terrorism. So they can be really strict here, and I mean it's a thing that it's an European thing in my opinion. So usually Americans, they are not used to face it, and when they do, it's when they really wish that they had talked to Sarah before.
Yeah, I mean, we talking about sort of bank, but even in the US, we've got clients with our banks that are, do struggle with international payments. I mean, we've had a number of clients call us from their bank, and they're in branch, and they're like, "Can you speak to the bank teller? They've never seen an IBAN before." All sorts of things like that. And it is a struggle, and it's challenging, and all banks are different. So within the different states, so we have clients that bank with the same bank but in different states. They have different processes, they have different charges. It is a bit of a minefield there, I think, or they don't get the support that they need, because again, it's not something that they've often done before, and don't really know how to send the payment properly often. And that's the other thing, that we normally can speak to them, and we tell them how to send the payment. So that can be a little bit of a challenge. And also, I think since sort of COVID, obviously there is a little bit more fraud around. There's more sort of increase in security. So banks do ask more questions now whenever you send a payment to anybody, even if it's your own account. It's just checking, are you sure you want to send it? And a lot more highlighted sort of security options. So it's things like that we can help you answer, but it can be quite daunting, that sort of process in dealing with the banks, because as I said, if you are dealing with your bank and there's a delay and you're trying to chase the payment or find out where it is, it can be very frustrating, speaking to somebody at the end of the day. So that's why sort of from the personal perspective of us getting involved, we know exactly where your money is. We've got extra tracking on the payment. We can tell you where it is, when it's in the beneficiary. And as I said, we can liaise with the banks just to make that a little bit easier. So process. The other thing as well is, again, why to start thinking about this if you can before you move, is to really be speaking to your banks to find out what you need to put in place. So it may be that you're in America and you've sent a couple of payments, they've gone fine, or maybe you're here in Portugal and you've done some small amounts, they've gone fine, and now you're thinking, I want to buy a property, or I want to send a little bit more money. That's where often the banks are like, okay, you're sending more money, it's a big amount, we need more authorization. What does that look like? Clients often have been asked to come and fill a form in the branch. Do you need an international card reader? Again, that's something you can get in branch. We've found a lot of clients, unfortunately, have come stuck where they're here and they can't move their money, or there's a restriction or restraint. So one client, they were trying to buy a property here in Portugal, and their US bank had a limit on how much they could do. It was $70,000 every 30 days. It would have taken them a good few months to transfer that money. Some online banking have a limit on how much you can do each day. So again, you could be doing a transfer every day for 2 weeks, which is fine. But it's things like this that it can make it slightly more challenging. We've even had clients had to fly back, which unfortunately is an hassle and cost. So what does your bank need in order to make those international transfers? We can help with that. We have dealers have a lot of experience with a lot of the different banks, so see what the best options. We can chat to you and find out what bank you have currently, and give guidance on that, which banks that we found easier to work with, sort of what processes they have in place. Like Charles Schwab, for example, you have to fill in a form. So again, it's sort of finding out what that looks like. I mean, we've even had clients that have given power of attorney to like family members, but obviously that's only if you trust them. But the things, as I said, you can put in place. Again, easier to do that when you're there in your home country, if possible. If you're already here and you're thinking, I'm already here, this could be, there are still things, it's not a kind of, well, that's it, but there are things that perhaps you can do, and not everybody's flying back. But as I said, we have seen these instances where this is what someone's gone through, this is what's happened, and it's just trying to make sure that you don't encounter that, or how you can make that process a bit easier. So again, if anything, is just these are the things to start thinking about sooner. It's about the preparation really for the move to to Portugal. And again, it's like things like, which you probably will anyway, but making sure you do keep your US telephone number. I keep my number because they do send authorization codes to it. So it's things like that, you know, you can't give up everything, perhaps, depends on your situation, but it's just keep, you know, making sure that you have everything you need to make sure that you can move and you don't have to fly back, or there's not more hassle, or just even access to your money at the end of the day, and make that easier. So other elements we're going to touch on, again, it's all about why you need to move money. And obviously Victor has a lot of experience in this as well. So we thought we would touch on that to give sort of a different aspect. Sometimes people will ask us and ask Victor, should I be buying a property now? Now, we can't give advice on that. We can't tell you that you should or shouldn't. But what we can say from experience, what we've seen is, obviously, from my perspective, obviously exchange rate movements can impact the cost of your property. So, you know, if the exchange rate is good, then that's probably an element to think actually makes that property slightly cheaper. We are seeing house prices increasing as well. So that could be another sort of element to think about. But I think Victor can shed more light on this.
Yes, Sarah, that's true. So, in regards to buying a property, it's hard to give you any kind of recommendation. Usually, what happens is when starting the process, the person who is willing to move to Portugal, they will start renting a property just to make sure that they are sure that they want to live in that specific region, or if make sure that the property is well, it's what they are looking for actually. And then usually in the next year they will start looking for properties to live. If you can make it in a way that you will save money by, uh, for example, using Sarah's service, that can be really useful, because at the end of the day, I think most people, they go after the property, to buy a property here in Portugal. I don't know if it's that they, living here for 1 year, they decide that yes, Portugal is the place that I want to live for the rest of my life, or I don't know what can be related. But usually in around 1 year, people start looking for properties. And yeah, having planned this step can help a lot. Not only the money transferring, but also documents. It's important to plan ahead, not to face any kind of struggles that you could avoid. There are some documents that are important when you decide to go ahead and buy a property. You need your NIF number, you may need your bank account. So just be prepared. I guess Sarah's message related to plan ahead, it really goes with the whole process, not only the money exchange, but the moving to Portugal, getting your documents in place, and certainly for buying a property that goes the same way. We cannot predict the price, of course. Nowadays I have this feeling that it's a little bit uh, more expensive than before. At least from when I moved to Portugal 7 years ago, we could see a huge spike in the price of the property, but we never know if it will still go up, or if we reach to that level that will start going a little bit on the opposite side. But just my we can handle we cannot predict the price, but we can plan for it. So my message is to do it, plan it before. And it's a nice thing that if you can come to Portugal to see the place from yourself, this is always advisable.
Yes.
I don't know
I
if
mean,
you agree.
some people are buying quickly. Others, they've already been on a number of, I suppose, scouting trips. So it depends on how familiar you are with Portugal. The ones that I see that are buying property sooner are people that perhaps have come on a number of holidays, a number of scouting trips, and they're a bit more familiar with some of the areas. And that's where they've found the area that they love to live in. And they're like, yes, this is my area. And they've found a dream home, or and they've gone ahead and bought. As Victor said, if you do need an address for the visa, and if you did buy a property in advance so that you've got proof of address for your visa, as Victor says, make sure again it's all about the timing. You factor that in, because obviously it can take time to buy a property with the process and the documentation. So if you're needing it ASAP for your visa, obviously that could be a bit of a struggle. So make sure you do that sort of further in advance to make sure it's ready for that, if that's what you wanted to do. But yeah, a lot then who've never been here will rent, to make sure that, A, they want to stay here, and B, that gives you a chance to have a look round. What I would say is, I think we went to an event recently about, people have it in their mind of what they definitely want, what they definitely don't want. And sometimes, like myself, initially where I live right now wasn't where I planned to live. It's between Cascais and Lisbon. I thought I'd be more in Lisbon, but I needed an address straight away for my visa. So I thought, worst case, I've got the address, I'll stay in it for a short period of time until I can have my AIMA appointment, and then I'll look to move. But actually, I really like where I live, the area, I really like the apartment, so I've stayed. So again, that's something to think about when you're actually looking for rental property, is sometimes maybe you go with something that's maybe not quite exactly what you want, but it gets you here, gets you the visa, and then because you're renting, you can give notice and you can move, or you've explored the area and then you found your dream home and you buy. But as I said, it's just also thinking, when people ask, the other side I've seen over the last couple of years is that house prices are increasing, but don't forget the exchange rate, because people worry about that. But actually, for some at the time, they have saved money, or it's not, the impact of the house prices is not as bad for some, because you've benefited from the exchange rate. So just elements to think about. Again, it depends on your situation and probably how often you've been to Portugal, and where you choose to live. So the bank account, Victor can shed a little bit more light on this, of the sort of process of opening and sort of, as I said, the timings of that as well.
Exactly. At the end of the day, those are documents that you will need for the visa. So there's no escaping. There's some expenses that are related to the process. So, and in regards to bank accounts, there's so many things that can go wrong, unfortunately, that can add some months to your um, for your planning to move to Portugal. And one thing that keep happening is that the process for opening a bank account, it's divided into stages. So first one, you will deliver the documents and information for the bank. Then those information will go to the compliance, and then the bank account is created. So you receive one IBAN. Most people think that, okay, I now I have an IBAN. It's all fine. I can use the bank, but usually that's not the case. We've had some clients who started using the bank account at this stage, and unfortunately, the money had to go back because there's still a need for the bank to activate the bank account, and this activation can take weeks, can take months, we never know. So that's just to say that the planning of your moving can maybe not follow your expectations. So be prepared. That's the only message. Be prepared for something not going as you were expecting. uh, we know that there is a challenge because usually we'll have a date for the application. So we have to hurry to get all documents before that date. So there's a little bit of expectations. some frustrations, unfortunately, but I mean, you can do some things to be more prepared. So this is in regards to bank accounts, and yes, if you plan to buy a property to comply with the accommodation requirement, you cannot rely on your bank account to be created if that can take more time than you were looking for. So yeah, those are things that can happen when creating the bank account.
Yes, so again, it's research and preparation for things, and realizing that you might be used to things happening quite quickly where you live. Things can take a little bit longer, and it's factoring that in just so that you're not stressed like before your VFS appointment and sort of down to the wire or whatever. I know what that can be like. So as Victor said, that sometimes you are given an IBAN, but it's actually not sort of authorized for a few months. So, for example, if we were to transfer money to your IBAN, they wouldn't accept the money, wouldn't be accepted, to be rejected because it's not fully authorized. So, what clients have done is that we can hold the euros for you, and we can pay third parties. So we can pay, the rent, and we can pay. Obviously, as Victor said, for the visa, you will need to see the proof of account and with money in it, or money sort of going in. So again, as I said, for key appointment dates, those sort of things will have to be in place. But up until then, it won't stop you from making the payments and things that you need to make. We have that solution. But again, as we said, just make sure that you're just giving yourself plenty of time when you're moving to Portugal and thinking about these sort of things. Taxes. So I put it in briefly just because it's something, just again, something to think about. I'm not a specialist in tax, so would speak to a specialist. Sometimes what I see with clients is that they have somebody in Portugal and they have someone in the US. There is maybe the odd few, but not that many that do both. So often you might need one in one country and one in the other. I know that my Portuguese tax specialist will speak to my UK accountant, so they can liaise together, which that's helpful for me. But a lot of clients that I've met that are here often do say that, the things that if wish they'd done is they looked into taxes, and they looked into money transfer, but not as much as they should have done. So again, it's just thinking about that in a little bit more detail. But Victor can maybe mention a little bit more about the taxes. One quick thing on the taxes, though, we don't report to anybody, but we do give you all the information you need in order to fill in the FBAR, because if you have an account with us and you've got money moving through it.
Also, just to point out, Sarah, very quickly, I cannot emphasize how important it is for you to consider your taxes before you start the process. This can be really a game changer for you in deciding where to move, if it does make sense. And we are also not a tax specialist, but we have partners that can help you navigating the process. Okay, so if you have any questions regarding taxes, you can just send me an email and I will direct you to the specialist.
Okay, and then just again wanted to explain who we are. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I work for SpartanFX. We specialize in the conversion of currency from one country to another, so US dollars to euros, Canadian dollars to euros, pounds to euros, and so forth. And as I said, we have the licensing in place to deal with people in various different countries. So, for example, America, we've got the money transmitter licenses with FinCEN, and the FCA in the UK, but also we can hold money on account as well, which is often quite useful for clients. We also have a moving money guide. So you can either request a copy by sending an email, or you can use the QR code, and you can request a copy and we can send that to you. So it goes through some of the things that I've touched on, and basically that might be useful. Again, it depends on your situation. If it's something you're in the process and you're looking to move in the next maybe 6 months or so, then it may be that you want to start having conversations with us. Please do get in touch. Otherwise, maybe the guide at this stage, if you're early doors, might be something to consider first. And I think that's it from me.
Okay, Sarah, thank you so much for this nice webinar. And now we can move on to the questions. I'll just put here on the, yes, so I added here our email address. So if you, there you go, if you need to contact us. Because probably we won't be able to go over all questions, but if you still have some questions later, then you can just email me or Sarah, and it will be a pleasure to answer them out. So, guess I will start from the beginning. Uh, we have Sophie Garzon that asks about the 10. We just talked about tax, the 10% tax income regime. Um, Again, I can direct you to the tax specialist, but I guess you were referring to the NHR. This is a tax regime that used to be in place, but now they are kind of changing it to a new one. But there's some lack of rules to regulate this new NHR. So for now, I would suggest just talking to the specialist. And I see that there are two questions related to the NHR. You can email me and I'll put you in touch with the specialist. Let's see if there's. Yes, George also mentioned the NHR. Um, Let me see here. I'm trying to look for question related to the money exchange here. It will be recorded. We'll all have access to this webinar, to the recording. So Sarah, Eileen is probably that's related to a topic that you were talking about. So she asked about the difference in which way, meaning better to exchange USD for euro. Please be
Yes.
specific and clear.
Yes. So if you're selling US dollars and you're buying euros, then at the moment it is very good. It is very good levels to be buying. As we saw in the graphs, which we can bring back up, is that basically in the last, yes, we have been lower in 20, as I said, 2022. But if we look back in the last year, or even we go further back, it is still very good levels.
Okay. I don't know if there is one from Daniel. He asks, what about buying futures?
That's not something we do. As I said, we have the forward contracts, which is where we can fix the rate with a 10% deposit, and then 90% is needed when you want the full amount. So it's not a cost or a charge. So we do a forward contract, but we don't buy futures.
Okay. Also, Portugal Captain Pemi asks, what are the best banks options in Portugal?
In
I
Portugal,
mean,
that would be for Victor to answer.
yeah. I mean, what is the best options? That's a good question. We know there are some banks that are more linked to technology, so they have a app that is well designed. I mean, and I can just talking about technology. I know that Millennium is a good one. We deal with Novo Banco quite often. I mean, I don't think that there's one best bank. They can cover some different aspects. So it's just a matter of you talking to the staff over there to see what they can provide. But they're very similar, in my opinion, in a way. So they're very similar, as Sarah mentioned. Some of them, they are a little bit more old school, more papers involved. So I don't think that there's one best bank.
I suppose in this instance, it's what's initially the easiest for you to open. Maybe once you get here and you're here, then you can maybe change. But obviously, key obviously is to get one open so that you can obviously use it as proof or whatever.
It's a very good, very good point. So what if you already have a euro account in a different euro country?
I mean, if you've got a different euro account in a different country, if you're still converting from another currency into euros, then we can still assist with that. If you have euros, then there's no conversion, so obviously there's no need for our service. But I think if you're asking around if you've got a euro account in a different country, I think if I remember Victor obviously can explain more detail, but I think with the visa, they request it to be a Portuguese bank account.
Exactly. That's it. Portuguese IBAN. Let's see. I'm skipping those questions related to tax because again, I ask you to send me a message and I will direct you to the specialist.
I think someone asked about the international card reader. I believe it's like a sort of small little device that you can slot your card in, and it means that when you, I suppose, come to do a payment in your authorization, there's a code I think comes up on the card that then you input as a sort of extra authorization that not everybody necessarily has.
Exactly. So there is this last one from Robert. Let's see here. So hi, we are visiting Portugal, April 25th to May 5th to try to decide on an area. We have kind of focused on Silver Coast, probably around Porto. I'm all about it. We will start in Lisbon and work on our way north. We will be renting. If there is an area that is a better benefit cost-wise, US dollar to euro. Can we open the bank account while we are there visiting? This is it's a good question related to where to live. Do you have an opinion about this one, Sarah? Where to live?
Well, I think certainly yes. I mean, depending where you come from. I mean, I come from the UK and have been living around London. So, like, obviously, Lisbon and Porto are cities and they're more expensive, not as expensive as London. So when you go further out of the sort of cities, then becomes cheaper. So again, sort of areas inland and are more cheaper. I mean, Silver Coast, I like. I mean, the Silver Coast, you've got what I like about Portugal is that it's not a massive country, but there's lots of different towns that are very different. So I definitely think you'll find somewhere that's good for you. So along the coast, you've got sort of up to Nazaré, Santa Cruz, which is nice around there. Then there's San Martino de Porto up the coast. You've got Caldas de Reina. That's only about a 20-minute drive from the coast there at San Martino de Porto. That I like that area. Then you go inland. You've got places like Tomar. You've got Alcobaça and Obudush. I'm just thinking about where customers tend to go and live a little bit as well. And then you've got, obviously, you go up to Coimbra, and then as where you settle, Braga, which is north. It's interesting whether it's true. People can obviously give me more feedback, but some clients I speak to are from certain places in America, and they tend to move to the similar places. So a lot of clients that I've met from Colorado like to move more north towards Ponte Lima, which is closer to the Spanish border, because it is cooler, and I think there's higher altitude there. And then I had a guy that he's from San Diego and he lives in Santa Cruz. He likes Santa Cruz Nazare because it reminds him of San Diego. So there will be somewhere for you.
I totally agree, Sarah. I mean, and also it's the good thing is that you don't really need to have a car because I mean the train line is very good here. You can go from I guess the further north line is in Braga, if I remember well, and you can go down to the Algarve. So there is a very good public uh, uh, transport system. So yeah, it's only a matter of you. That's what we were talking about before. If you have the chance to come here to see for yourself, that's always something recommended.
Renting a
And
car is quite cheap. So if you did base you somewhere and then you could rent a car now and then travel about, again, just like most places, as you move further out of cities, then you may well want to think about possibly a car because it does make it easier perhaps to get around. Whereas if you're living closer to somewhere like Porto or into Lisbon and around sort of where you might not need a car because there's a lot more public transport, and certainly Ubers are quite cheap as well.
exactly. So just last one, Eileen. She mentioned that Revolut has just been approved to conduct banking in Portugal. I also read that news. I've never. I mean, I have my Revolut account from the UK. I don't know if that's. I mean, so something so recent that I cannot answer you if it will comply with the visa requirements. It should. I mean, now it's a Portuguese branch, but I don't know more specifics about this new branch in Portugal. This Portuguese IBAN should work.
The only thing that I do maybe a little bit more research on Revolut. I've seen some stuff in the press over the last probably 12 months around sort of their sort of compliance and sort of with the regulator and things like that. So I think for travel money is great. Obviously, you've got a card, but actually holding money, larger sums in there, that's where I'd sort of consider obviously security of funds. With us, all your money's protected, so if anything should happen to us, you get all your money back. So again, it's just kind of looking at that in more detail as well.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Really nice having you with me again. I guess this is our second or third
I think it's our
webinar
third
together. I guess
webinar. Yeah,
the third, right?
it's interesting.
Yeah.
I think this is probably our second since I've moved here, though. So it'd be interesting to
Oh,
watch the first one back because at that
oh
point I
yeah.
was moving. Basically, I blame people like Victor as to why I'm here.
We'll have many more, that's for sure. Thank you everybody for being here up to now. Really nice reading your questions. Again, please contact Sarah if you need any assistance with money exchange. And it was really nice having you here with me, with us. And thank you, Sarah, again.
No problem. And as I said, please get in touch. It is free to have a chat with us. So whatever your situation, your time frames, and we can just keep in touch. Or as I said, if you want to ask anything about Portugal, then definitely happy to talk about that as well.
Thank you, everybody.
No problem.
Bye.
Bye. Boa noite.
Good night.